The noted author Madeline L'Engle wrote once, "You have to write the book that wants to be written. And if the book will be too difficult for grown-ups, then you write it for children." The story that we just heard about Pink and the empty pot is like that. Pete takes the seeds and tries to grow a flower for the emperor, and nothing grows. His father tells him to take his empty pot for the emperor to see. Ping is ashamed to show the emperor his empty pot when the other children are presenting such beautiful plants and flowers, but show it he does. The emperor tells the other children that they did not grow flowers from the baked seeds, and because Ping had the strength of character, stronger than his vulnerability, he becomes emperor of the land. One of the aspects of this story is that the narrative presumes several things. The emperor is kind. There's little fear in this situation. The emperor has created a system in which children may approach him, and they and their parents do not experience more fear than one might have at meeting the President of the United States at the White House. Ping's father trusts the goodwill of the emperor. The emperor leads a nation where trust is presumed, goodwill is expected, creativity and talent are nurtured, and vulnerability is not punished. Ping's father tells him to take the empty pot to the emperor. In this story, Ping exemplifies two of the traits of wholeheartedness, according to Brene Brown in her book, Daring Greatly. The lesson from Brown's book and the empty pot are helpful in our lives and in the church. Ping is willing to face his shame and is willing to be vulnerable. Brown believes that overcoming shame and being vulnerable are traits that are needed for wholeness. I call it wholeheartedness. Now, Brene Brown is a protege of Oprah Winfrey, and knowing that some of her proteges have been proven to be charlatans, I was aware that this might have been questionable. It was also considered that the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have dealt with one of her proteges recently and might be wary of learning from another. And it seems to me that Brene Brown does have something significant to share with us about wholehearted living. Wholehearted living, or wholeness, according to Brene Brown, is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to be thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am also brave and worthy of love and belonging. Shame and vulnerability are aspects of our everyday lives. After being with Unitarian Universalists for more than 30 years, being a member, working for, or serving as minister to 17, maybe even 18 congregations. I always lose track. I have come to some conclusions about our strengths and challenges, both individually and collectively. One of the things that I observed is that many Unitarian Universalists tend to be perfectionists. Brene Brown defines perfectionism as a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. The destructive quality of perfectionism is that perfection does not exist, at least not with human beings. Believing that perfection exists means constantly chasing after the unattainable goal and being frustrated. And frustrated can also lead to anger, sadness, and other things. And because perfectionism leads to shame, judgment, and blame, we often believe that it's because we weren't perfect enough. I would add to this, perfectionism also causes one constantly to see imperfections in others, sometimes shaming, judging, and blaming them for not being perfect as well. Would Unitarian Universalists do something like that? Not on our best days, but yes. Our faith does not give us a devil to blame. It posits that our theology or philosophy needs to come from us. We build it ourselves. If we are frail, it is not because that is human nature, but because we're not perfect enough, sometimes, is a fault that goes through our heads. We can also be judgmental, not in the same way others are judgmental, but judgmental in a Unitarian Universalist way, I guess. Ned Flanders is a good-natured Christian fundamentalist who lives next door to The Simpsons in the animated television series. I still remember from probably 25, 30 years ago, a throwaway line from his wife when she was describing her summer plans to Marge Simpson. She said, "I'm going to a church retreat. I'm trying to learn to become more judgmental." Sometimes, when I wonder whether Unitarian Universalism is really a religion, I recall judgmental things that Unitarian Universalists and sometimes even congregations have done or said, and I think to myself, yep, maybe we're still a religion. We're imperfect, but that's part of being human. That's also part of being in community with other human beings, recognizing that nobody's perfect. As long as we have the saving grace of humor and a spirit of humbleness, we can move beyond the judgmental attitudes that perfectionism entails. Moving away from perfectionism is part of that spiritual journey. And it was part of my journey. When I was a child, I experienced several theological dilemmas. One was about Christian ethics and the nature of Jesus. I was growing up in a very conservative Christian denomination, very large Southern Christian denomination. Simply put, I wanted to be as perfect as I perceived Jesus to be. I wanted to live a life like his, but I felt that I was constantly failing. It occurred to me, though, that the problem was not in wanting to follow and be like Jesus, but in the impossibility of being at all like him. In the faith in which I was reared, Jesus was half human and half God. Only the God part mattered. I could not hope to be as perfect as Jesus the God because I was human. If I accepted Jesus as merely human, then I could also accept that he was imperfect, because to be human is to be imperfect. This theological insight was liberating to my child spirit. Removing the Holy Trinity enabled me to embrace Jesus differently and to follow him as an imperfect but wonderful human being. Of course, I hid these theological insights from my conservative Christian family at the time. Otherwise, I might have wound up in the minister's office for the correction of my heretical, nascent Unitarianism. One of the insights from this spiritual insight was that Jesus often led from his vulnerability, often opening his heart to others, being unafraid to let others see into his deepest fear and his humble origins. He used that vulnerability to connect with that which is common in the human spirit. The responsive reading that we entered into early is about human vulnerability and acknowledging that we need each other to contain our fear and to be a community of imperfect persons. Shame can enter into any system and it leads to disengagement. When we're disengaged, we don't show up, we don't contribute, and we stop caring. Strangely, one of the antidotes to disengagement is honest feedback given in a way that does not empower shame. One of the things that I think that ministers and churches need to do is to give feedback to each other. Feedback, when misused, can promote shame, but judiciously applied can inspire all who are involved. It's not being invulnerable, but vulnerable, and admitting that one makes mistakes and is imperfect. It's about admitting brokenness sometimes. This vulnerability is important as King demonstrated. We need to hear things in community sometimes like, I don't know, I need help. I'd like to give it a shot. It's important to me. I disagree. Can we talk about it? It didn't work, but I learned a lot. Yes, I did it. Here's what I need. Here's how I feel. I'd like some feedback. Can I get your take on this? What can I do better next time? Can you teach me how to do this? I played a part in that. I accept responsibility for that. I'm here for you. I want to help. Let's move on. I'm sorry. That means a lot to me. Thank you. These are the things that people say when they are engaged. They're willing to admit their ignorance, their need for others, their feelings, their disagreements, their willingness to try something again, their ownership of their failings, their responsibility, their brokenness, and their gratitude. They're willing to show the empty pot, and they do not have to be overly courageous to do so. As I thought on this message, I kept thinking about Carl Jung and his concept of wholeness. He describes it as a state in which consciousness and unconsciousness work together in harmony. As Unitarian Universalists, our conscious reality is high-minded and good, open to different perspectives and new reality. That is the part in us that remembers the purposes and principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. They call us to our higher selves. In some ways, I have witnessed time and again our high-mindedness is overwhelmed by other factors in community, often in our unconscious. Our success may hinge on our ability to reach this wholeness, or as Brene Brown calls it, wholehearted living. This means living authentically and vulnerably, grateful for diversity and acknowledging that nothing and no one is perfect, especially ourselves. Accepting that we are broken, that our congregations, all of them, also are broken in some way, enables us to work not out of a place of shame, but a place of vulnerable honesty. In other words, courageously saying sometimes that we did our best and we not grow. One of the things I like about services in the Episcopal Church, I like going to churches other than, where I'm located in South Jersey, going to a church, a Unitarian Universalist church would take me more than an hour's drive or a long commute into Philadelphia, probably by train. So I go to the Quaker meeting or Episcopal church. But one of the things I like about them is they have a general confession that states, among other things, I have done those things which I ought not to have done, and I have not done those things which I ought to have done. I always like that, in fact, that it covers everything. Everything is in there. Omission, commission, it's there. The strength of that confession, though, is not theological, but in the unison acknowledgement that everyone says it, admits that he or she is not perfect. And the alleviation of shame that comes from that, it acknowledges the full humanity of people. Episcopalians say this in unison on Sunday mornings. Removing the theological trappings, this acknowledges that everyone makes mistakes. We who are Unitarian Universalists, these words are by Erica Hewitt. You know Erica Hewitt because she wrote the benediction we hear every Sunday morning. You say where you look at each other's eyes. And she wrote these words about wholeness. And she mentions a lot of things about brokenness. And I would say, instead of brokenness, say imperfection. But this reading I thought was worthwhile, and we will end with this. We who are Unitarian Universalists not only affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, We also affirm the inherent worth of every being, despite apparent brokenness. No one hearing these words is a stranger to pain or the knowledge that things break or break down. Promises, friendships, sobriety, hope, communication. This breaking down happens because our hearts and our very institutions are frail and imperfect. We make mistakes. Life is messy. Brokenness happens. We're intimately acquainted with brokenness. Then, even as we believe that no matter how fractured we are or once were, we can make whole people of ourselves. We are whole at our core because of the great, unnameable, sometimes inconceivable love in which we live. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that paying attention to something is an act of love. Witnessing and naming brokenness is how we begin to heal it. Healing begins when we examine what's in pain, wonder how it occurred, and allow it to teach us. In fact, sometimes the brokenness is immense, and the only grasp, the only power we have over that large and complicated pain looming over us is to bear witness, to tell its story, and to seek out companions and helpers who are willing to agree that, yes, there is something breaking or messy in front of us, and we will not leave or even look away until repair has begun. If love begins with attention, repair takes the form of compassion, bearing witness, speaking out. Repair looks like connection, justice, or even revolution. It looks like after-school tutoring programs, community meals, or holding signs in front of City Hall. And it begins by placing full trust and faith that there is an inherent wholeness in every broken situation. So be it. Blessed be. Amen.